Inner Traditions Audio presents The Mysterious Life and Faked Death of Jesse James, based on family records, forensic evidence, and his personal journals, by Daniel J. Duke and Teresa F. Duke, read by Micah Hanks. An Introduction to Who's Who. Like many outlaws throughout history, the famous and infamous Old West outlaw Jesse James had aliases, and in order to fake his death and live out a peaceful life, he needed a really good alias. It seems that when a person uses an alias, though, life naturally gets much more complicated. He or she has to live by another identity, and in Jesse's case, it took years to transition from one life to a new one, using the alias James Lafayette Courtney. Jesse used other aliases at different times in his life, but the alias James Lafayette Courtney was the one alias that he stuck with, lived with, and was buried with. Under this alias, Jesse James was a small-town Texas farmer, husband, father, Freemason, and more. You will hear much more about Jesse throughout this book, but in order to keep the story straight and easy to follow, we thought it would be helpful to provide a list of names with short descriptions. Jesse James had a wife, but that wife wasn't the wife that historians have named. His real wife was not his first cousin, as history has stated. When finding out that Jesse faked his death and lived out his life in Texas, some have exclaimed that it was terrible that he abandoned his wife and children in Missouri just so that he could save his own life. What those people were missing was that the wife they thought he had wasn't his wife, and the children they believed he had weren't his children. That is but one example of how things can get confusing and have been confused for well over a century in regard to Jesse James and his life, or lives. We would like to note, however, that the confusion created throughout Jesse's history worked in his favor, and without it he may not have gotten away with one of the biggest hoaxes in American history. Some of the more commonly used names, along with names historically associated with Jesse James, are listed here to help curtail any possible confusion. You may wish to refer back to this list when hearing Jesse's diary, which forms the appendix of this book, featured in the supplemental PDF. We believe Jesse Woodson James and James L. Courtney were one and the same. That said, there was also a real James L. Courtney, and the real James L. Courtney was a neighbor and relative of Jesse James. In our late mother's second book, The Truth About Jesse James, she illustrates how the story becomes further confused because the Courtney family also used aliases and changed their name to Hahn. She states, quote, "Theodore Napoleon Hahn was really Theodore."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?